I don't know if anyone has noticed I try to stay gender neutral in my videos as much as possible. I will use they, them, theirs pronouns, and I do that in conversations in daily life as well. Because as a non-binary person, as a gender fluid person who has spent years presenting masculine only, years presenting feminine only, years switching it up every other day, I notice people treat me differently depending on how I present. And in conversation, I notice that people treat the conversation and the perpetrators that I'm talking about differently depending on what pronouns I use for them. And it tells me a lot about them when they slip up and share a pronoun that they think is applied to the situation. And that tells me a lot about them and their view on gender, their view on violences, and just everything in the world. And I still have these slip-ups too. I had one the other day with one of my friends. It happens, but I try to eliminate it in my space as much as possible as a non-binary person because I view the world differently. I don't view the world from a gender binary stance nearly as much as I used to. I still do in some sense because it's a lot to unlearn and the world is tailored that way. But I try to unlearn it as much as possible. If I use he, him, his pronouns, I'm going to get a bunch of man haters in the comments who are claiming to be feminist and misandrist, but they actually don't follow through with any type of praxis. They just want to hate men, and then they start getting transphobic. And we've learned in recent discourse online that a lot of people who call themselves feminists are also just TERFs, and apparently there's a new term called a MRF, which is just a rebranded, repackaged form of TERF. But they're calling themselves radfems, radical feminists, which is literally TERFism. And if I use she, her, her pronouns, I might get a bunch of red-pilled incels in the comments who are now women haters and are going to say a bunch of shit about women. So I try to avoid that as much as possible and just talk about the task at hand, which is usually some kind of violence that I've experienced and the things that I've learned from it. That's what I like to talk about, and that is why I leave gender out of it. Gender definitely comes into play in many instances and scenarios, but I don't talk about it personally because I don't have the words or the knowledge to navigate these conversations at all these different levels that people on the internet are coming from. So I leave it out. I do that on my page on purpose. It's intentional. In college, there are separate learning spaces for people who need to learn the basics first, 100 and 200 level courses, and for people who have already learned the basics and want to dive deeper, which would be 300, 400, 500 level, depending on the school, the major, etc. There's a reason for that. People need separate learning spaces because they're all at different levels of learning the topic, and that's okay. It doesn't mean someone is worthy or not of living or of being happy or having a good life. But the internet doesn't have that differentiation, and I don't think it would be very helpful because people on the internet get real ableist and elitist or like just anti-intellectual, both ends of the extreme, really fast. The fighting, instead of being open and open-minded, that is where we're getting in trouble. I personally do not witness enough people on the internet being open-minded versus stubborn, ready to dig their heels further in the mud when they make a point and someone challenges it. I don't think that short-form content is the place to discuss these things at all anymore. Although I'm still going to do it because I know that I am surrounded by people who like to be challenged by me and people who have consistently challenged my line of thinking. And the one thing that I value in myself the most when it comes to how I interact with the internet today compared to like a year ago even, is that I listen and I'm open-minded and I don't have to comment, I don't have to like anything, I don't have to repost anything. I sit back and I watch. The internet now is full of children and adults who are interacting with each other, whether they know that or not, very different levels of life, very different life experiences and views on the world, okay? So that's one thing. We're also in a literacy crisis. That's another. There are also trolls on here who like to mess with people for fun. And there are bots who also mess with people. They're trained to do it like the trolls do for fun. Their list goes on. I don't think this discourse stuff is ever going to stop. I think humans were meant to disagree. We're meant to conflict. It's objective. It doesn't have to be so emotionally charged, but it is. We're going through really, really hard times. That's the end of my video. I ended it sounding like I was going to say more, but I didn't have anything more to add. It's a habit that I've always had since I was a kid. If you have anything to correct, anything you want to say, like I said, I'm open-minded. I'm just here to learn. I don't really think I should be alive if I'm not learning. I think that's really the only reason I'm here. So I don't really care. If I got anything wrong, I'll just say I'm sorry and take in the new information. That's all we can do. I gotta go shower and play Tamagotchi Life. Have a good day.